Hello everyone, this is the first video in my chess channel, which will be exclusively dedicated to chess. And I will try to make it very short, because it's a simple introduction video to the Sicilian Defense, which is a defense played by black against the first move pawn to e4 by white. And it goes as following: pawn to e4, pawn to c5. Now you can see all these arrows here, because first move pawn to e4 opens two diagonals, one for the bishop, one for the queen. The bishop most typically goes to c4 or b5, where it attacks directly the king. The queen doesn't usually come out soon, but it can come out on this diagonal and still harass the king, because you typically cast on the king side, almost never on the queen side. So the most typical move is knight to f3, and here you will play pawn to d6, which is called the open variation of the Sicilian defense. This pawn to d6 controls a little bit of the center and allows the bishop to leave. Usually you don't come out with this bishop soon, because this diagonal is very weak. It's white's control, because this bishop can come right at it. And if it does, you have to block it with one of your pieces. I suggest the bishop or the knight, because the queen is not a very good move. In fact, it's losing. Now, the most typical move after pawn to d6 is pawn to d4. Now, pawn to c5, what does it do? Pawn to c5 attacks the square d4. So the purpose of pawn to c5 is to stop white from having too much center control with his pawns. So, since white sees that black doesn't want him to take control with his pawns, white voluntarily offers the exchange, usually. And when black takes this pawn, the knight typically takes back. And here, this pawn is not being defended. So you can play knight to f6, attacking the pawn. He has to protect it. And then, this is the position where you have the four main variations of the Sicilian defense. And they're all highlighted here. Let's take a look from left to right. First, the move pawn to g6. This is called the dragon variation, and it consists in playing the bishop to g7, castling, and using this open file to attack. You rarely play in the center, and you usually use these pawns to advance, gaining more space, controlling more squares, and trying to get an attack on the enemy king. Now, the other move is pawn to e6. This is called as the Scheveningen variation. The simple plan is bishop e7 and castling, with a very safe king, and then you can decide what to do. You can still have the same plan, attacking with these pawns and using this file. The other move, knight to c6. This is called as the classical variation, although I do not recommend it to beginners, because there are many easy lines for white to get an advantage. If you don't know a lot of theory, this one is a very simple line. You are almost forced to play the bishop here, and then you can play the bishop here. Your position is very cramped, not that it's bad at all, but white has a lot more freedom. This is usually true in the Sicilian defense, but after you play, let's say here, the queen can come to d2, the bishop can come here, and white can castle long. And while you're still very far away from an attack, actually white can already attack with his pawns. Why attack with the pawns? Because if he pushes these pawns, and even if he loses the pawns, he will have two open files for his two rooks, which will be very strong against your king, and you will most likely not keep fighting very long in the game. But let's not get too deep in this position. And let's take a look at pawn to a6. This is called the Najdorf variation. This is the most popular variation, but probably the easiest variation for you to learn is pawn to g6. Pawn to a6 has the simple idea that this square has to be very well protected, because 3 pieces can already go there. And if you have a pawn on a6, no piece can go there. So you waste 1 move to stop 3 pieces from coming there. And it's not a wasted move, because let's play here. Now let's say you play here. The knight goes back. You will play your bishop here. You can always play this move and put your bishop in there. But you can always play your bishop here and castle anytime. So it's a very dynamic opening. Let's just make a few quick remarks. If white decides to play d4 here, you take the pawn, and if he takes with the queen, you can take your 2 knights out very quickly. This one attacking the queen, and this one just developing. It doesn't necessarily attack the pawn, unless he plays his queen, let's say here. Now it attacks the pawn, and he cannot push it forward because you can take it. Another possible move is that he doesn't play knight f3. He plays here, controlling d5, which is a very important square, and also aiming at b5. So here you can play e6, and after knight to f3 you can play knight to c6. And after bishop to c4, which is not the best move, but it is tempting to place the bishop in this diagonal, where the king will most likely be. You can play your knight to f6, and if he castles, here you have the perfect opportunity to play d5. You can count the pieces. He has 3 pieces defending. He has 3 pieces attacking d5, and you have 3 pieces defending it. So if he trades here too many times, he will lose a piece. If at any time he checks, you can simply block it with either of your bishops. I like this one more because it prepares a castling move. Let's also take a very quick look at what happens if he decides not to play d4 ever. You should just take your knights out and then prepare your castle position. You can push this pawn, play your bishop to e7 and castle. You can push this pawn, play your bishop to g7 and castle. And you also have a different move, which is pawn to d5. You can play it if you want, but it's not too much of a Sicilian move right away, because after he takes, you have to take with the knight, and if he castles, you can play e5 with a very good game indeed. You have probably an advantage here because of the so strong control of the d4 square. But he can also play c4, and after you move your knight, he has a nice control of the d5 square too. So I will end this video here, so I don't make it longer. I hope you enjoyed it. I'll make other videos for the main variations of the Sicilian defense, showing you how to play with white and how to play with black. I hope you enjoyed the video, and I'll see you next time.